The maps you trust have been hiding a shocking, forbidden truth. 54 rival nations signed a treaty to hide this incredible mystery. A lone sailor just found what lies beyond the forbidden ice walls. His shocking discovery confirms a secret known since 1947. The truth is more shocking than you could possibly imagine. Stay with us to see the classified footage that proves it all. Negated history of Talbot Sewentualinevskov life. In 2016, a story emerged from the very ends of the earth. An Italian mariner named Claudio Nocelli delivered a tale that defied possibility. He journeyed beyond Antarctica's ice walls, bringing back a destabilizing new report. But before we explore his incredible journey, we must first ask a question. Why is Antarctica the one continent where people are forbidden to explore freely? Why did 54 rival nations sign a treaty to lock it down completely? Why do commercial airlines refuse to fly over it, despite the massive savings? And why are satellite maps of this continent deliberately blurred and erased? Claudio Nocelli was consumed by these same questions, determined to find answers. Nocelli was no amateur theorist, he was a man of the deep sea. With 3 decades of experience, he had commanded vessels across every ocean. His standing in the maritime community was considered completely beyond reproach. He held an intimate understanding of navigation, weather systems, and ocean currents. His practical knowledge surpassed what most scientists learn from behind a screen. In early 2016, Nocelli began planning an incredibly dangerous expedition. An expedition that would either etch his name in history or erase it. His goal was to sail further south than any private mariner had dared. He was determined to challenge what we are all told about Antarctica. He vowed to witness with his own eyes what truly lies far beyond, past the colossal ice structures that encircle the continent like a fortress. The preparation spanned months. He was charting a course into some of the most treacherous waters in the world. The Southern Ocean is infamous for its ferocious storms, for unpredictable seas that can birth rogue waves 100 feet tall, and an unforgiving cold that can crystallize life from a man in minutes. Yet, the physical perils were only one facet of his preparations. Nocelli was fully aware that his endeavor was, in many respects, illegal. The Antarctic Treaty system, signed into law in 1959, declares huge portions of the continent off-limits to any unsanctioned exploration. Military maneuvers are forbidden, nuclear testing is outlawed, and critically for this story, independent voyages into certain zones require permits that are almost impossible for a civilian to obtain. The official justification centers on environmental protection and the preservation of scientific research, but Nocelli and many who came before him held a deep suspicion that another unspoken reason existed. He departed from Ushuaia, Argentina, the world's southernmost city, in late January 2016. His ship was a specially reinforced sailing yacht, outfitted with the finest navigation technology available, carrying enough provisions for a 3-month voyage, and equipped with multiple high-resolution cameras to capture a faithful record of his journey. The first week unfolded without incident. He successfully navigated the Drake Passage, a notoriously violent strait where the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans clash in a perpetual fury. But Nocelli's skill and his vessel's strength prevailed. He pressed on, his heading always south, venturing deeper into waters few private sailors had ever entered. And then he saw them, the ice walls. When we picture Antarctica, we imagine a land of snow and ice surrounded by drifting icebergs. This is only part of the truth. What is often omitted is the reality that much of Antarctica's perimeter is guarded by a sheer vertical wall of ice, rising anywhere from 30 to 60 feet from the ocean's surface. In some places this barrier stretches for hundreds of miles, a seamless, unbroken rampart. Explorer after explorer has confronted these walls. Even the legendary Captain James Cook, who circumnavigated Antarctica in the 1770s, documented being blocked by immense ice barriers that seemed to stretch to infinity. In the 1840s, Captain James Clark Ross faced similar structures, likening them to the white cliffs of Dover, but sculpted from ice and extending beyond the horizon. Roald Amundsen, the first man to conquer the South Pole, also noted these formations in his journals, observing that they seemed almost unnatural in their sheer scale and uniformity. Every expedition that has ever tried to penetrate the Antarctic deep has been met by these barriers. Most have been forced to turn back. But Claudio Nocelli did not turn back. His log details days spent tracing the edge of the ice wall, hunting for any fissure, any gap, any sign of a way through. The wall felt endless, a perfectly constructed fortress designed to repel intruders. His equipment began to register bizarre readings. The ship's compass started to behave erratically. His GPS began to flash coordinates that belonged to no known map. Then, following nearly 2 weeks of relentless searching, he discovered it, a narrow channel, barely wider than his ship, slicing through the ice wall like a hidden door to another world. What unfolded next is what makes Claudio Nocelli's account so divisive. A story attacked by mainstream science, yet one that remains impossible to fully debunk. He sailed through. On the other side of that ice wall, Nocelli claims to have found something that, according to every official chart and accepted model of our planet, should not exist. He found an open ocean, not a small meltwater pool, but a vast temperate sea that stretched beyond the horizon. More astonishingly, this ocean was significantly warmer than the freezing waters he had just traversed. His instruments registered a sudden temperature jump of 15, even 20 degrees. The oppressive, bone-chilling cold of the outer Antarctic gave way to a climate that was almost mild. In the distance, he saw coastlines, land masses that appeared on none of his charts. He filmed unusual atmospheric phenomena, strange, self-illuminating cloud formations, and documented wildlife that had no right to be in what is supposed to be the harshest environment on Earth. Nocelli captured dozens of photographs and hours of video. He logged GPS coordinates that placed him in locations that officially do not exist. He recorded his findings with the meticulous care of a man who understood that without extraordinary proof, no one would ever believe him, and he was right. The institutions that control the narrative of our world did not believe him. When Claudio Nocelli returned from his journey and began to present his evidence, the reaction was immediate and absolute. Mainstream scientists dismissed him out of hand. His data was branded a fabrication. His photographs were called digitally altered. His coordinates declared impossible. Maritime authorities launched an investigation into how he received clearance for his voyage. Some whispered that he never sailed as far south as he claimed. Others suggested that the extreme isolation had fractured his mind. But there is something they could not explain away. Nocelli was not the first to make such claims. He was merely the latest in a long succession of explorers to report these same discoveries, and unlike so many before him, he returned with digital documentation, with coordinates and video evidence that, while challenged, has never been conclusively disproven. Why would Claudio Nocelli, a man with 3 decades of respected maritime experience, risk his reputation, his career, and perhaps his life to venture into forbidden waters? Why would he tell a story he knew would be met with ridicule? The answer, he insists, is simple: because he witnessed something real, something that exists on the other side of the ice walls. Something that someone or some group is determined to keep hidden from the rest of humanity. To grasp the true significance of Claudio Nocelli's discovery, and why it was met with such organized resistance, we must examine one of the most peculiar international agreements in history, the Antarctic Treaty of 1959. On December 1st of that year, 12 nations met in Washington to sign a document that would effectively seal off an entire continent. Today, 54 countries are party to this agreement. Consider that for a moment. 54 nations, many of whom are bitter rivals, all found common ground on Antarctica. Countries that were sworn enemies, nations with diametrically opposed ideologies, the superpowers of the Cold War, all agreed on a single point: Antarctica must be controlled. The official justifications sound noble. The treaty designates the continent a scientific preserve, guarantees freedom of research, and bans all military activity. Nuclear explosions and the dumping of radioactive waste are prohibited. It all sounds like a laudable act of environmental stewardship and enlightened global cooperation. But let's examine what the treaty accomplishes in practice. First, it forbids any independent exploration of vast sections of the continent without explicit government approval. You cannot simply mount an expedition to Antarctica as you might to Everest or the Amazon. You require a labyrinth of permits and authorizations from multiple international bodies, permissions that are almost never granted to private citizens. Second, certain zones within Antarctica are declared completely off-limits. No access, no appeal, no explanation given. These are not minor areas. We are talking about regions the size of European countries that have been deemed restricted. Why? What could possibly be in these zones that demand such absolute secrecy? Third, the treaty created a bizarre system of overlapping territorial claims that are simultaneously honored and ignored. 7 nations assert sovereignty over parts of Antarctica, yet the treaty states these claims are effectively frozen, neither accepted nor denied. It is a legal contradiction that allows these countries to maintain quasi-military presences while claiming the continent is demilitarized. And here is perhaps the most telling detail. The treaty can only be modified by the unanimous consent of all consultative parties. In other words, every major power must agree before a single word is changed. When in history have dozens of powerful nations ever unanimously agreed on anything of consequence? Yet on Antarctica, they are in perfect accord. The status quo must be preserved. Some researchers find it telling that the Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959, just 12 years after the enigmatic Operation High Jump, the largest military force ever deployed to Antarctica. We will delve deeper into Operation High Jump later, but for now understand this. Something occurred in Antarctica in 1947 that compelled the world's governments to lock down the entire continent with an ironclad international treaty. That is not speculation, it is a documented fact. Something happened, and then a system was created to ensure no one else could discover what it was. Now let's return to what Claudio Nocelli actually saw when he arrived at the edge of this protected continent. The ice walls. If you look at any official map, Antarctica appears as a roughly circular landmass sheathed in ice, surrounded by the ocean. Ice shelves extend into the water, and icebergs calve off and drift away. That is the picture we have been given, a frozen continent slowly melting at its periphery. But this is not what explorers find when they actually get there. They find something far more imposing and far harder to explain. They find massive, vertical walls of ice, rising 30, 40, sometimes 60 feet straight out of the sea. He altered course, and the systems returned to normal. He was later told by authorities that he had encountered a known magnetic disturbance, and that discussing the incident publicly would cost him his license. What connects all these testimonies is the pattern of their treatment afterward. Reports vanish, evidence is confiscated, people are warned into silence. These are not all fantasists. They are working professionals, and they all tell essentially the same story. There is more to Antarctica than we are being told. But if we are to be honest investigators, we must examine the counter-arguments. What does mainstream science say? Claudio Nocelli's journey can be explained through known phenomena. He likely navigated through a natural gap in an ice shelf and entered a Polynya, a large area of open water surrounded by ice, which is common. The warmer temperatures can be explained by upwelling ocean currents that bring warmer water to the surface. The wildlife he saw may have been migratory species. The land masses could have been known islands he misidentified due to atmospheric distortion and magnetic interference. From a conventional scientific perspective, Nocelli's entire journey is plausible without hidden continents. Admiral Byrd's comments about enemy aircraft in 1947 were almost certainly referring to the nascent threat of Soviet bombers using polar routes to attack the United States, a very real strategic concern at the beginning of the Cold War. His disputed diary is widely considered a fabrication. The ancient maps showing an ice-free Antarctica have been extensively studied. The scholarly consensus is that they are compilations of imperfect knowledge and speculation, and their resemblance to Antarctica is largely coincidental. The U.S. Air Force analysis has since been challenged by modern cartographers who argue the map is a distorted projection of South America. The underground caverns and subglacial lakes are real, but there is no credible evidence they contain anything more than microbial life. The government secrecy can be explained by legitimate national security concerns and international agreements designed to prevent conflict, and the testimonies of individuals are just that, anecdotes, which are not scientific evidence. Human perception is fallible, especially in extreme environments. So if we apply strict scientific skepticism, most of the Antarctic mysteries can be explained, but skepticism can also be used to dismiss legitimate anomalies. Science has a long history of rejecting evidence that doesn't fit established paradigms. The question is not whether science can explain these mysteries. It can. The question is whether those explanations are complete, and whether the dismissal of alternative theories is based on genuine scientific reasoning or on institutional resistance to challenging ideas. What then does it all mean? Whether Claudio Nocelli discovered hidden lands or misinterpreted natural phenomena, one truth remains undeniable: Antarctica is not what we have been told it is. The continent holds secrets. Some may be scientific, others historical, and some, if the testimonies hold any truth, may be actively suppressed. Nocelli's current situation is its own story. After his voyage, his professional life was systematically dismantled. He lost contracts, faced legal challenges, and was blacklisted from the maritime industry. Today, he continues to speak about his experience, maintaining that what he saw was real. Perhaps the real mystery is this: in an age when private citizens can launch rockets into space, why has no one with significant resources attempted to verify Nocelli's voyage? Why has no billionaire adventurer mounted an expedition to sail through the ice walls and document what lies beyond? The answer may be a simple lack of interest. Or it may be that those with the means to do so understand there are consequences for discovering certain truths. What we know is that Antarctica is the last truly mysterious place on Earth. It is a continent larger than Europe, almost entirely unexplored, protected by a treaty system that tightly controls access. Information about it is filtered, managed, and classified. The pattern is too consistent to be a coincidence. So here is the challenge: do not just accept what you have been told. Look at the evidence for yourself. Study the maps, listen to the testimonies, apply critical thinking to both the official narrative and the alternative theories. The truth about Antarctica matters because it connects to larger questions about how information is controlled in our world. If they are willing to hide the truth about an entire continent, what else are they hiding? The truth, whatever it may be, is out there, beyond the ice walls, beneath the frozen surface, hidden in classified documents and suppressed testimonies, and you deserve to know it. They were too uniform, too continuous. He wrote that while nature can create impressive structures, the walls ringing Antarctica possessed a quality that hinted at something more than random geological forces. Mainstream science explains these walls as ice shelves, formed when glaciers slide off the land and extend over the ocean. The leading edge of these shelves does form vertical cliffs where chunks break off in a process called calving. This is a well-documented natural phenomenon, but here is where the official explanation begins to fray. Ice shelves are inherently unstable. They are in constant motion, constantly fracturing, yet the explorers who encountered these walls described them as remarkably permanent. Cook saw them in the 1770s, Ross in the 1840s, Amundsen in the early 1900s, and Claudio Nocelli found them in 2016. The same walls, in roughly the same locations, for over 240 years. That is not how ice shelves behave. They are dynamic systems that advance and retreat. They should not maintain the same essential structure for centuries. There is another problem. Most ice shelf cliffs rise 10 to 30 feet above the water. In rare cases they might reach 50 feet, but multiple explorers, including Nelly, have documented ice walls reaching 60, 80, even 100 feet above the sea. That is far beyond the norm for any known ice shelf. So what did Claudio Nocelli encounter in 2016? According to his detailed logs, he sailed along the ice barrier for 13 days, covering over 600 nautical miles. The wall was an unbroken rampart, varying in height from 30 to 70 feet. His instruments suggested the ice extended another 100 to 200 feet below the surface. The wall was not a jagged cliff. In many places it was smooth, almost polished, as if shaped by forces other than simple freezing and thawing. As he neared the wall, his instruments registered bizarre magnetic readings. His compass would spin wildly for minutes at a time. His GPS unit displayed coordinates that didn't correspond to any known map system, and the temperature, which should have been brutally cold, was actually warmer than the open ocean he had just crossed. None of this aligns with what we are told about Antarctic ice shelves. Nocelli documented these anomalies meticulously, searching for what every explorer before him had searched for: a way through. And after 13 days he found one. A channel, narrow and treacherous, cutting through the ice. It was barely wide enough to accommodate his vessel, the ice walls on either side soaring high above his mast. The passage twisted for what he estimated was nearly 10 miles through solid ice. He considered turning back multiple times. If the ice shifted, his boat would be crushed. But he pressed on, and eventually the channel opened up. The walls receded, and he sailed into an ocean that was not supposed to exist. What Claudio Nocelli witnessed when he emerged from that ice passage defied everything he knew about the geography of our planet. The water temperature immediately jumped. His instruments, which had registered between 28 and 32 degrees Fahrenheit in the outer ocean, now displayed readings of 45 to 50 degrees. That is a temperature change of nearly 20 degrees in less than a mile, a phenomenon that simply does not occur in oceanography outside of major current boundaries. The first thing that struck him was the quality of the light. Beyond the ice walls, the atmosphere was different. The harsh, flat glare of the Antarctic exterior was replaced by something softer, almost hazy, with a warmth that seemed impossible at this latitude. The sky itself had a strange luminescence, as if the clouds were generating their own light. He checked his coordinates obsessively. His GPS placed him at latitude 78 degrees south, deep within the Antarctic Circle, in a location every map showed as solid ice. Yet here he was, in open water, looking at distant shorelines that were not supposed to be there. He cut his engine and let the yacht drift. For the first time in weeks, the only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the hull. The silence was unnerving, and in the distance, perhaps 20 or 30 miles away, he could see land. Not ice, but land. Dark, rocky outcrops rose from the water, with what appeared to be vegetation. Through his binoculars, Nocelli saw steep cliffs and what might have been beaches at their base. The formations were stark and dramatic, like volcanic islands, not the smooth, ice-draped contours of Antarctica. He began filming and taking photographs, documenting everything with multiple cameras. He knew what he was seeing would be dismissed as a fantasy. Over the next several hours, Nocelli sailed parallel to the distant coast, his sonar revealing another anomaly. The ocean floor here was only 200 to 400 feet deep, far shallower than the waters outside the ice wall, which plunged to depths of over 10,000 feet. This suggested a continental shelf, which meant a significant landmass was nearby. A landmass that, according to official cartography, did not exist. As the hours passed, Nocelli noticed the wildlife. Seabirds, dozens of them, of species he recognized from more temperate climates. Gulls, cormorants, birds that live where there is open water and abundant food. Then he saw something breach the surface 100 yards from his boat. It was too large and fluid to be a seal. It surfaced again, closer this time. Through his camera lens, he captured what looked like a marine mammal, perhaps a type of whale or dolphin, but its body shape matched no species he knew. It surfaced 3 times before vanishing. By late afternoon, his instruments read 54 degrees. Nelly stood on the deck of his boat in the supposed frozen heart of Antarctica, wearing only a sweater. The air smelled different, less sterile, with a mineral quality and an underlying organic scent like seaweed. He collected water samples, which later analysis revealed had a lower salinity than typical Antarctic seawater and contained minerals consistent with geothermal activity. The water was being warmed from below. As evening approached, Nelly faced a choice. He could press on toward the unknown coast, or he could turn back while he still had daylight and preserve the evidence he had gathered. He had come alone. If anything happened, no one would ever know. His evidence would disappear with him. Prudence won. He turned his vessel back toward the ice channel. But as he approached the area where he believed the entrance was, he could not find it. The passage had seemingly vanished. For nearly an hour, Nelly sailed along the wall, a growing anxiety creeping over him. Finally, he spotted an opening. Whether it was the same one, he couldn't be sure. The return journey was terrifying. The channel felt narrower, the ice groaning and cracking around him. 2 hours later, he emerged back into the familiar harsh cold of the outer Antarctic. The temperature plummeted instantly. It felt as if he had crossed a threshold between 2 different worlds. He pointed his bow north and began the long voyage home. He had his evidence, his coordinates, his samples, his photographs, and his video. When he finally reached Ushuaia, he began trying to share his discovery. He contacted scientific journals, geographical societies, journalists. Almost universally, he was met with silence or scorn. One oceanographer told him, on condition of anonymity, that even if his account were true, it would never be officially recognized. The Antarctic Treaty, the professor explained, exists for reasons that go far beyond environmentalism. There are things in Antarctica that governments have agreed must remain hidden, and anyone claiming to have found them will be discredited, marginalized, and if need be, silenced. Nelly persisted, publishing his findings on independent websites. And that is when the trouble began. Maritime authorities questioned his permits. Tax officials launched audits. His professional credentials were scrutinized. Colleagues distanced themselves. A reputation built over 3 decades of impeccable service began to disintegrate, but Nelly refused to recant because he knew what he had seen, and he is not the first person to reach this conclusion. His story is just one chapter in a much longer, stranger history of Antarctic exploration, a history that includes a decorated American admiral whose discoveries were so shocking they may have altered the course of the Cold War. Rear Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd was no fringe figure. He was one of the most celebrated explorers and military officers of the 20th century. He had flown over the North Pole, led multiple expeditions to Antarctica, received the Medal of Honor, and was entrusted with the nation's most sensitive operations. So when Admiral Byrd said he had discovered something extraordinary in Antarctica, people listened. And when the government immediately classified what he found, people began asking questions. The story starts in December 1946, just a year after World War II. The United States military launched the largest expedition to Antarctica in history, Operation High Jump. The scale was unprecedented. 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier, 33 aircraft, and 4,700 men. This was not a research mission, it was a military invasion force. The official story was vague, testing equipment in cold weather and establishing research bases. The mission was planned to last 6 to 8 months. But here is the first mystery. Operation High Jump was abruptly terminated after just 8 weeks. The largest military force ever sent to Antarctica packed up and left with no official explanation, other than that objectives had been met. But declassified documents tell a different story, referencing equipment failures, unexpected casualties, and encounters with hostile forces. Hostile forces in Antarctica. When Admiral Byrd returned in April 1947, he gave several press interviews. To a Chilean newspaper, he stated that the United States needed to prepare defenses against enemy aircraft that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. He spoke of the necessity of eliminating enemy bases in both the Arctic and Antarctic. This was 1947. Germany and Japan were defeated. Who was this enemy? In another interview, Byrd claimed Antarctica held secrets that could affect humanity's survival, that beyond the South Pole existed a land of eternal mystery where he had seen things that would be hard for anyone to believe. Then Byrd was debriefed by military intelligence, and he never spoke publicly about Operation High Jump again. But he kept a personal diary, and entries from that diary, whose authenticity is fiercely debated, describe experiences that read like science fiction. According to a controversial entry dated February 19, 1947, Byrd was flying over the polar plateau when his instruments went haywire. Then he saw it, a lush green valley with mountains free of snow. The diary claims his aircraft was approached by disc-shaped craft of a type he had never seen, which somehow took control of his plane and guided it to a landing. What followed was an alleged encounter with a tall, fair-haired people who spoke English and warned him that humanity's use of atomic weapons had them deeply concerned. They asked Byrd to deliver a message to his government, a warning that humanity was on a path to self-destruction. Now, this diary has never been conclusively verified. Many believe it is a fabrication. But here is what we know for certain. Admiral Byrd did lead Operation High Jump. The mission was massive and was cut short without explanation. Byrd did make cryptic public statements about his discoveries before being silenced. And something happened down there that convinced the United States and multiple other nations to lock down Antarctica under an international treaty just 12 years later. There are declassified reports from High Jump that mention significant, unexplained casualties and the discovery of ice-free areas covering tens of thousands of square miles, with visible mountain ranges and possible vegetation that appeared on no existing maps. What connects Admiral Byrd's experiences in 1947 to Claudio Nocelli's in 2016? Look at the patterns. Both men reported finding anomalously warm areas in Antarctica. Both encountered magnetic disturbances that crippled their navigation equipment. Both discovered land or open water where maps show only ice, and both were effectively silenced after sharing their discoveries. Byrd by military classification, Nocelli by professional ruin. The coordinates Nocelli recorded for his ice channel fall within the same general region that Operation High Jump reports identified as containing unexplained ice-free zones. Is it possible that Nocelli sailed into the same hidden area that Byrd flew over 70 years earlier? The United States was not the first nation to take a peculiar interest in Antarctica. Several years before Operation High Jump, between 1938 and 1939, Nazi Germany launched its own expedition, shrouded in secrecy. Officially, its purpose was to scout for a whaling station, but the expedition, aboard a ship called the Schwabenland, used advanced aircraft to fly reconnaissance over a vast area of the continent, dropping thousands of metal swastikas to claim the territory. They named it Neuschwabenland, or New Swabia. Expedition reports mention the discovery of ice-free mountain ranges. Here, documented history gives way to speculation, but speculation rooted in disturbing fragments of evidence. Throughout the war, there were reports of unusual German U-boat activity in the South Atlantic. Several U-boats that left European ports in the final days of the war never surrendered and were never accounted for. They simply vanished. Rumors persisted that these submarines were transporting personnel and cargo to a secret Antarctic installation known as Base Tuquanquint. In 1943, Admiral Karl Dönitz, head of the U-boat fleet, reportedly boasted that the German submarine fleet had built an invulnerable fortress for the Führer in another part of the world. The evidence is circumstantial, but it is compelling. U-boats did surrender in Argentina months after the war ended, their captains giving cryptic accounts of long journeys to the south. Some researchers have theorized that the true purpose of Operation Highjump was not exploration, but a search-and-destroy mission targeting a secret Nazi holdout in Antarctica. This would explain the massive military force, the combat-ready nature of the fleet, the unexplained casualties, and why so much of the operation remains classified to this day. This pattern of secrecy and strange discoveries is not limited to the Germans and Americans. Soviet expeditions in the 1950s and 60s remain largely classified, with reports of vast underground caverns warmed by geothermal heat. Early 20th century explorers like Ernest Shackleton wrote of rhythmic, purposeful sounds coming from beneath the ice. Roald Amundsen documented areas where his compasses became useless, and the temperature spiked unexpectedly. Robert Falcon Scott wrote in his final journals about the feeling that Antarctica was hiding something, that beneath the ice were secrets not meant to be revealed. From Nazi expeditions to Admiral Byrd to Claudio Nocelli, the story is consistent. Explorers go to Antarctica expecting one thing and find another. They find warmth where there should be cold, land where there should be none, and when they try to report what they saw, they are silenced. The modern mysteries of Antarctica become even more profound when you realize that this supposedly undiscovered continent appears on maps that predate its official discovery by centuries. The most famous of these is the Piri-Reis map of 1513. Created by an Ottoman admiral, the map shows the coastline of Antarctica with stunning accuracy, over 300 years before it was officially discovered in 1820. Even more impossibly, it shows the coastline as it would appear without ice. It depicts mountains and rivers that are currently buried under miles of ice, features we only rediscovered in the 20th century using ground-penetrating radar. In the 1960s, the United States Air Force Cartographic Division analyzed the map and concluded, in a formal letter, that the coastline was mapped before it was covered by the ice cap. The ice cap in this region is now about a mile thick. This implies the map depicts Antarctica as it was at least 6,000 years ago. Piri-Reis himself noted that his map was a compilation of 20 older source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. This suggests a civilization capable of global navigation and cartography existed in deep antiquity. Other maps tell the same story. The Orontius Phineas map of 1531 and the Philippe Washer map of 1748 both depict an ice-free Antarctica with remarkable detail, showing interior mountain ranges and even the waterway that separates East and West Antarctica beneath the ice sheet, a fact only confirmed by modern science. These cartographers also claimed their work was based on ancient source maps, now lost to history. The implications are staggering. If Antarctica was mapped before the ice came, it means a sophisticated global civilization existed thousands of years ago, a civilization whose existence has been all but erased from our official history. This aligns with theories of a lost civilization, destroyed by a cataclysm at the end of the last ice age, whose survivors brought knowledge to ancient cultures around the world. Could that lost civilization have been based in a then-temperate Antarctica? The idea of vast hidden spaces beneath the Antarctic ice is not science fiction, it is scientific fact. In 1996, Russian scientists discovered Lake Vostok, a body of liquid water the size of Lake Ontario, sealed more than 2 miles beneath the ice. It is kept liquid by geothermal heat and immense pressure. Microbial life was found in the ice just above the lake, proving that life can exist in this extreme environment. But shortly after detecting strange magnetic readings from the lake area, the Russians halted their drilling just shy of the water itself, citing environmental concerns. Since then, access has been heavily restricted. Scientists have now identified over 400 such subglacial lakes, connected by a network of hidden rivers. Where there is liquid water and geothermal heat, there is the potential for life. Antarctica is also one of the most volcanically active regions on Earth. This volcanic activity melts the ice from below, creating vast caverns and tunnel systems. In 2017, researchers discovered a network of caves near Mount Erebus, with internal temperatures reaching 68 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough to support mosses, algae, and potentially more complex life. Could these underground networks be large enough to be habitable? Could a civilization faced with an encroaching ice age have survived by retreating underground? We have no direct proof, but anomalies persist. Satellite thermal imaging shows hotspots of unexplained heat emanating from beneath the ice. Unofficial reports from research stations describe rhythmic, low-frequency pulses recorded from deep underground. The animals Nelly saw, species adapted to temperate climates, suddenly make more sense if they are emerging from a warmer hidden ecosystem. The evidence of government suppression is undeniable. Open Google Earth and zoom in on Antarctica. You will see large areas that are deliberately blurred, pixelated, or censored. These censored zones often correspond directly with the locations of reported anomalies. Whistleblowers, like a retired Navy flight engineer who in the late 1990s saw a massive, artificial-looking hole in the ice, have been silenced and have had their careers ruined for speaking out. Geologists who find evidence of modern construction in pristine areas have their samples confiscated and their contracts terminated. The pattern is clear. Information is controlled, access is restricted, and those who discover things they are not supposed to are marginalized. Beyond the ice, Antarctica's atmosphere exhibits behaviors that defy known physics. Auroras appear without solar activity, pulsing in geometric patterns. Circular holes, hundreds of miles wide, form in solid cloud cover. Automated weather stations record inexplicable temperature spikes of 45 degrees in a matter of hours. Luminous orbs of light are seen rising from the ice and moving with apparent purpose. These are not just anecdotes. They are documented phenomena that mainstream science struggles to explain. Perhaps the simplest explanation for the secrecy is the most cynical: resources. Antarctica contains some of the planet's largest deposits of coal, iron, gold, platinum, and rare earth minerals. It may hold over 200 billion barrels of oil, rivaling the entire Middle East. Why would 54 nations agree to a treaty banning the exploitation of trillions of dollars in wealth? The official answer is environmentalism. A more plausible answer is control. Perhaps the treaty is not about preventing exploitation, but about managing it in secret, ensuring that whatever is found, whether resources or something far more world-changing, remains in the hands of a select few. Claudio Nocelli's story is not an isolated incident. It is a modern echo of testimonies stretching back decades. A Norwegian fishing captain in the 1950s, who found a passage to anomalously warm waters teeming with temperate fish, only to have his catch confiscated and his license revoked. An Australian pilot in the 1990s, who photographed geometric structures exposed by retreating ice, only to have his photos lost and his flight paths rerouted. The pattern is always the same: a discovery followed by denial, confiscation and suppression. Of course, there are mainstream explanations for all of this. Nelly's open ocean could have been a polynya, a known area of open water that forms naturally within ice packs. The warmer temperatures could be explained by oceanic upwelling. Admiral Byrd's statements can be attributed to Cold War paranoia. The ancient maps could be cartographic errors and coincidence. This scientific skepticism is necessary, but it can also become a tool for dismissing genuine anomalies. Science has a long history of rejecting evidence that contradicts the prevailing paradigm, only to accept it decades later. So what does it all mean? Whether you believe in hidden lands and ancient civilizations or prefer more conventional explanations, one truth is undeniable: Antarctica is not what it seems. It is a continent of secrets, some scientific, some historical, and some perhaps deliberately kept from us. Claudio Nocelli's life is a testament to this. After his voyage, his professional reputation, built over 30 years, was systematically dismantled. Yet he continues to speak out, maintaining that what he saw was real. The greatest mystery, perhaps, is why, in an age of billionaire adventurers, No one has mounted a serious public expedition to verify his claims. Perhaps those with the means to do so already know what they would find, and understand the consequences of revealing it. The truth about Antarctica matters because it is a proxy for larger questions about our world, about the control of information, about the narratives we are fed versus the reality that exists. If a secret of this magnitude can be kept about an entire continent, what else are we not being told? The truth, whatever it may be, lies waiting. It is beyond the ice walls, beneath the frozen surface, and hidden within classified files. And it is a truth we all deserve to know.